A disabled SEAL, a logistics officer, someone the mission didn't need. Then the ambush began. Marines were pinned down. Radios went silent. The kill zone closed in, and the one person everyone ignored saw the pattern first. What they didn't know was that the woman filing supply reports was once called Black Widow. And when 4 Navy helicopters suddenly diverted mid-mission, it wasn't to extract troops. It was because she had just taken control of the fight. From wherever you're watching, let us know in the comments. And if this story has earned you respect, click like so others can find it too. The desert wind carried dust through the staging area at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, coating everything in a layer of pale grit. Marines moved between vehicles with the practiced efficiency of men who'd done this 100 times before. Weapons were checked, radios tested, coordinates verified. The mission brief had been simple. Extract a high-value target from a compound 40 kilometers north. Standard operation. The kind of thing these men could do in their sleep. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the staging area, her prosthetic leg hidden beneath desert fatigues that hung just slightly wrong on her frame. She held a tablet, fingers moving across the screen as she reviewed supply manifests and equipment logs. Her job was clear: ensure the teams had what they needed, then watch them leave. That's what logistics officers did. That's what disabled veterans who refused to fully retire did. They stayed behind. A group of Marines passed her, their voices low but not low enough. "She used to be something, I heard," one muttered. "Before the IED. "Yeah, well, used to be doesn't get you on the bird," another replied. "Desk work's probably safer for her anyway." Sarah's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but she didn't look up from her tablet. She'd heard worse. The injury that had taken her leg 3 years ago had also taken her operational status, her place among the teams, her identity as someone who mattered in the field. Now she processed paperwork while others did the real work. The mission commander, a barrel-chested major named Hawkins, strode past her toward the lead vehicle. He glanced her way briefly, the kind of look that acknowledged her presence without really seeing her. "Chen, make sure those medical supplies are loaded properly. Can't have the corpsman complaining again." "Already done, sir," she replied evenly. Checked them twice. He grunted what might have been approval and moved on. Sarah watched the teams load up, each movement precise, each man focused. She knew that focus. She'd lived in it once, when her call sign had meant something, when her presence in a mission brief had changed the outcome of operations. Now her call sign sat in a classified file somewhere, gathering digital dust. The first helicopter's rotors began to spin, the familiar whoomp-whoomp sound cutting through the desert air. Sarah stepped back instinctively, muscle memory from countless insertions keeping her clear of the rotor wash. 3 more birds followed suit, the combined noise creating a wall of sound that made conversation impossible. The Marines boarded with practiced efficiency, and within minutes all 4 helicopters were airborne, banking north toward their objective. Sarah stood in the settling dust, watching until they disappeared into the heat shimmer. Then she turned back toward the operations center, her gait slightly uneven despite years of physical therapy, and resumed the quiet work of someone the world had decided was finished. The operations center hummed with the usual rhythm of controlled urgency. Radio chatter filled the air as various units checked in, reports were filed, and the massive wall of monitors displayed feeds from drones, satellites, and ground cameras. Sarah sat at her station in the back corner, the spot reserved for support personnel who needed to monitor operations without being in the way of the real decision-makers. She logged equipment transfers, tracked supply inventories, and maintained the detailed records that would be reviewed later by people who actually mattered. Around her, intelligence analysts pored over imagery, communications specialists maintained contact with the teams in the field, and senior officers stood around the main tactical display, watching the mission unfold. Nobody looked at her. Nobody needed to. She was background, the administrative machinery that kept things running while others did the fighting. The mission was proceeding according to plan. The helicopters had inserted the teams without incident, and now the Marines were moving toward the compound. Sarah listened to the radio traffic with the trained ear of someone who'd once called in those same kinds of reports. The team leaders' voices were calm, professional, communicating in the efficient shorthand of experienced operators. Everything was routine. Then it wasn't. The first indication came from the intelligence section. An analyst stood up abruptly, headphones pressed tight to his ears, his face going pale. "Sir, we've got multiple vehicles inbound to the target location. Fast movers, at least 6 technicals, possibly more." Major Hawkins moved to the analyst station. "From where?" "Southwest, sir. They weren't there 15 minutes ago. They must have been holding in cover." Another voice cut in from the communications section. "Bravo team reports contact. Small arms fire from the compound." The tactical display updated with new icons, red markers blossoming around the Marine positions. What had been a simple extraction was becoming a firefight. Sarah's hands stilled on her keyboard. She watched the display, reading the tactical situation with the same clarity she'd once used to plan operations. The Marines were in a bad position, caught between the compound and the approaching vehicles. They were good, well-trained, but they were also exposed. "Get those birds back for extraction," Hawkins ordered. The air operations officer shook his head. "Sir, with that much fire in the area, the pilots won't risk a hot landing. We need to suppress those positions first. Then get air support in there. Nearest strike package is 20 minutes out." 20 minutes. Sarah knew what could happen in 20 minutes. She'd seen it before, in other firefights, other operations that had gone sideways. Good men died in 20 minutes when the situation was wrong. The radio chatter intensified, the calm professionalism giving way to clipped urgency. Teams were taking casualties. The enemy had known they were coming, had prepared. This wasn't a random encounter. It was an ambush that had been waiting to be sprung. Sarah stood up quietly and moved toward the tactical display, staying at the edge of the group of officers. Nobody noticed her. She studied the map, tracing roads, noting elevations, calculating sight lines and approach vectors with the automatic precision of someone who'd done this kind of analysis countless times. There was something wrong with the picture. The enemy vehicles weren't moving to engage directly. They were positioning, boxing the Marines in, but not closing. They were waiting for something. Her eyes moved to a cluster of buildings a kilometer west of the compound marked on the map as abandoned. Except they weren't abandoned. The angles were wrong. The positioning too perfect. She'd seen this before. "Sir?" she said quietly. Nobody heard her. "Sir?" she repeated louder. Hawkins glanced back, irritation flashing across his face. "Chen, this isn't the time. Those buildings to the west. They're not empty. We cleared that grid square. Intelligence confirmed no activity. Intelligence is wrong." The room went quiet. Every head turned toward her. Sarah felt the weight of their stares, the skepticism, the dismissal already forming in their eyes. The disabled logistics officer questioning the intelligence assessment. Hawkins's face hardened. "Chen, return to your station." "Sir, I've seen this pattern before. The vehicles aren't trying to engage, they're trying to drive our teams into a kill zone. Those buildings are a perfect position for heavy weapons. If our people move to avoid the technicals, they'll walk right into—" "I said return to your station, Lieutenant, that's an order." Sarah held his gaze for a moment longer, then stepped back. She returned to her corner desk, but her eyes stayed on the tactical display. The Marines were starting to move, pulling back from the compound to avoid being pinned down, shifting west to create distance from the approaching vehicles, moving exactly where someone wanted them to move. The next 30 seconds proved her right. The radio erupted with desperate voices. "Contact west, heavy machine gun fire. RPG, RPG. Man down. We've got men down." The tactical display updated again, new enemy positions lighting up exactly where Sarah had predicted. The Marines were caught in a crossfire, pinned between the technicals and the hidden positions in the buildings. Their training and skill were keeping them alive, but barely. Men were wounded. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Hawkins was shouting orders, trying to coordinate a response, but the chaos was spreading faster than anyone could control. The enemy had planned this perfectly, and now American Marines were dying because nobody had listened to the disabled woman in the corner. Sarah made her decision. She moved to the communications console, pushing past a startled specialist. Her fingers flew across the controls, switching to a frequency that hadn't been used in 3 years, a channel that technically didn't exist in any official database. She picked up the headset and spoke clearly. "Black Widow to any SEAL element in theater. Emergency authentication code Delta 79er Black. I need immediate QRF support at these coordinates." She rattled off the location of the besieged Marines, then added, Pattern is Fallujah 2014 Western Approach. I need shooters in those buildings now. There was a moment of silence. Then a voice came back, calm and professional. A voice that knew exactly who Black Widow was. Black Widow, this is Neptune 6. Authenticate. Sarah recited a string of numbers and code words that she'd thought she'd never use again. Authentication protocols known only to a very select group of people. The voice came back immediately. Authentication confirmed. Neptune is inbound. 4 minutes. Behind her, the operations center had gone completely silent. Every person was staring at her. Major Hawkins moved toward her, his face a mixture of confusion and anger. "Lieutenant, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Sarah pulled off the headset and turned to face him. For the first time since she'd lost her leg, since she'd been relegated to desk duty and forgotten, she let him see exactly who she was. "Saving your Marines, sir." The sound came first. The distinctive roar of helicopter rotors pushing hard, moving fast. Then the radio crackled with a new voice, authoritative and completely in control. "Neptune 6 to ground elements, we have your position. Engaging now." On the tactical display, 4 new icons appeared, moving with breathtaking speed toward the buildings Sarah had identified. The SEAL helicopters didn't bother with a safe landing zone. They came in hot, door gunners already firing, suppressing the enemy positions before the birds even touched the ground. Sarah watched the display with absolute focus, seeing the operation unfold exactly as she'd known it would. The SEALs hit the buildings with the precision of surgical instruments, clearing rooms and eliminating threats with the kind of efficiency that came from hundreds of operations. The enemy's ambush collapsed within minutes. Without their hidden positions, the technicals became vulnerable, and Marine marksmanship did the rest. The firefight that had been spiraling toward disaster stabilized, then shifted. The ambushers became the ambushed. Within 10 minutes, the enemy was either dead or fleeing, and the Marines were consolidating their position, treating their wounded, and preparing for extraction. The operations center remained frozen in stunned silence. Hawkins stared at the tactical display, then at Sarah, trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what he thought he knew about the woman standing before him. The radio crackled again. "Black Widow, Neptune 6. Grid is secure. Your Marines are safe. Good call on the pattern recognition." Sarah picked up the headset again. "Thank you, Neptune." Black Widow out. She set down the headset carefully and turned to face the room full of officers who were looking at her as if she'd just appeared out of thin air. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Finally, Hawkins found his voice. "Who the hell are you?" Before Sarah could answer, the main screen flickered, and a secure video feed opened. A face appeared, a weathered man in his 60s wearing the eagles of a Navy captain. His eyes found Sarah immediately, and something like relief crossed his features. "Lieutenant Chen," he said, and there was weight in his voice, the kind that came from shared history. "It's been a long time." Sarah straightened slightly. "Captain Morrison." Morrison's gaze shifted to Hawkins. "Major, I'm going to need you to seal this operations center. What I'm about to tell you is classified at a level that most of the people in that room don't have clearance for. But since Lieutenant Chen just saved your Marines using knowledge she should have taken to her grave, you deserve to know who's been filing your supply reports." He paused, then continued. "The woman you've been using as a logistics clerk is Lieutenant Sarah Chen, formerly Senior Chief Special Warfare Operator Chen, the only female member of SEAL Team 6's intelligence support element to ever operate under the call sign Black Widow. She ran deep cover operations in places we still can't acknowledge. She identified more high-value targets than most analyst teams combined. She personally led the operation that prevented a catastrophic attack on a NATO summit in 2013. The IED that took her leg also killed 3 terrorists who were about to detonate a VBIED in a marketplace full of civilians. She threw herself on the triggerman to stop the detonation. Morrison's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. She was supposed to retire quietly, stay out of operational planning. That was the deal we made after she refused a medical discharge and insisted on staying in service in some capacity. But old habits die hard, especially when lives are on the line. Hawkins had gone pale. Around the room, officers who had dismissed Sarah for months were beginning to understand the magnitude of their mistake. Morrison wasn't finished. The reason she recognized that ambush pattern is because she's the one who first identified it. In Fallujah 2014, She analyzed enemy tactical behaviors and predicted a series of ambushes before they happened, saving dozens of lives. The intelligence community still uses her pattern analysis in training. The captain's eyes returned to Sarah. I should be angry with you for breaking your cover, but I'm not. You did what you always do. You saw the problem, and you fixed it. Those Marines are alive because you were there, and because you refused to stay silent when you knew people would die. He straightened in his chair. Effective immediately. You're reinstated to operational intelligence status. I'm attaching you to Joint Special Operations Command as a senior tactical analyst. You'll work with SEAL teams, Delta, and any other Tier 1 unit that needs your brain. We'll figure out the logistics of the physical requirements, but your mind is too valuable to waste on supply manifests. Sarah's throat tightened. She'd accepted her exile, made peace with being invisible. The sudden restoration of everything she'd lost left her momentarily speechless. Morrison seemed to understand. You don't have to decide right now. But know this. You never stopped being Black Widow. You just stopped letting people see her. Maybe it's time to change that. The video feed cut out, leaving the operations center in ringing silence. Sarah stood in the middle of that silence, aware of every eye on her, feeling the shift in the air as perception realigned. She wasn't the broken veteran doing make work anymore. She was the operator who just saved lives using skills most of them didn't know existed. Hawkins stepped forward, and this time when he looked at her, there was no dismissal in his eyes. There was respect, and perhaps the beginning of understanding. Those Marines are going to want to thank you personally when they get back, he said quietly. I think I owe you an apology. Sarah shook her head slightly. No apology necessary, sir. You didn't know. I should have listened. Most people don't. She paused, then added, the enemy knew we were coming. Someone leaked the operation. You might want to start looking at your intelligence pipeline. Even in the moment of revelation, she was already working the problem, already seeing the patterns others missed. That was who Black Widow had always been. The operations center slowly returned to activity, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Officers who had ignored her now watched her with wary respect. The intelligence analysts moved aside, making space for her at the main tactical display. They wanted her input now, valued her assessment. Sarah accepted the change with quiet grace, neither gloating nor retreating. She simply stepped into the role that had always been hers, the role that a prosthetic leg and bureaucratic limitations had tried to take away. As she worked through the intelligence data, helping identify the source of the security leak, she was aware of the whispers spreading through the base. By nightfall, everyone would know. The disabled logistics officer was actually Black Widow, a ghost from the classified world, an operator whose skills had been hidden in plain sight. Some would be embarrassed by how they'd treated her. Others would claim they'd always suspected there was more to her story. It didn't matter. Sarah had never needed their validation. She'd needed purpose, the ability to use her skills to protect people. Now, she had that again. The helicopters returned hours later, carrying Marines who were battered but alive. When they filed into the debriefing room and saw Sarah Chen sitting at the head of the table beside Major Hawkins, there was a moment of confusion. Then one of the team leaders, a grizzled gunnery sergeant, made the connection. You're the one who called in Neptune, he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded. The gunnery sergeant looked at her for a long moment, then did something that surprised everyone in the room. He came to attention and rendered a crisp salute. One by one, every Marine in that room followed suit. Sarah stood, her prosthetic leg hidden beneath the table, and returned the salute with the same precision she'd learned decades ago in basic training. No words were needed. The gesture said everything. When the salutes ended and the room relaxed, the gunnery sergeant extended his hand. We'd be dead if you hadn't made that call. Thank you. Sarah shook his hand firmly. You would have found a way. You always do. Maybe, but it would have cost us people. He paused, then asked, How did you know? About the buildings? Pattern recognition, I've seen it before. Where? Sarah smiled slightly. The first real smile anyone at the base had seen from her. That's classified, Gunny. He laughed, and the tension in the room broke. The debriefing proceeded with Sarah providing tactical analysis, helping the teams understand how the enemy had set up the ambush and what it meant for future operations. She spoke with quiet authority, and this time everyone listened. This time, Her words carried weight. When the meeting finally ended and the Marines filed out, Hawkins remained behind. He studied Sarah for a moment, then said, "I've been in the Corps for 20 years. I thought I'd learned to see past the surface, to recognize talent regardless of how it's packaged. Apparently, I still have some learning to do. We all do, sir. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why let us treat you like you were just a disabled veteran doing busy work?" Sarah finished for him. "Because that's what I agreed to when I stayed in service. The deal was I'd stay out of operations, work support roles, and keep my past classified. It was supposed to be better for everyone. Was it better?" She considered the question honestly. "It was safer. For me, for the missions, for the people who still operate in those circles. My identity as Black Widow was a liability after the injury. Too many enemies knew the name, knew what I looked like. Retiring the call sign made sense operationally. But it cost you." "Yes." Hawkins nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you broke that agreement today. Those Marines are glad too. I'd do it again, sir. Every time." After he left, Sarah remained in the empty debriefing room, processing the events of the day. The life she'd built over the past 3 years, the quiet acceptance of diminished expectations, had been shattered in minutes. Captain Morrison's offer meant returning to the world she'd left, the classified operations and constant danger and fierce purpose that had defined her for so long. It also meant being seen again, being valued for skills that mattered. Her tablet buzzed with a message. She glanced down and saw it was from Morrison. "The offer stands, Black Widow, but take your time deciding. You've earned the right to choose your own path." Sarah looked around the empty room, thought about the Marines who'd saluted her, the officers who finally understood, the operators who'd responded to her emergency call without hesitation. She thought about the years she'd spent filing paperwork while her skills atrophied, the nights she'd lain awake feeling like she'd become irrelevant. The choice wasn't difficult. She typed her response. "I accept. When do I start?" The answer came back immediately. "You already have. Welcome back." Sarah Chen, formerly Senior Chief Chen, formerly Black Widow, sat in the quiet room and felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. The bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The disability hadn't changed that. The injury hadn't erased her skills. The bureaucracy that had tried to shelve her hadn't understood what they were dealing with. She was still Black Widow. She'd just been waiting for the moment when that truth could no longer be ignored. That moment had come. And in a dusty operations center in the middle of a desert war zone, surrounded by people who'd finally learned to see her, Sarah Chen reclaimed her identity not through speeches or demands, but through the same quiet competence that had defined her entire career. The world had tried to tell her she was finished. Today she'd proven otherwise. The moral wasn't complicated. True skill doesn't disappear when circumstances change. Real competence survives setbacks, injuries, and the dismissal of those who can't see past surface appearances. Sarah Chen had never stopped being exceptional. She'd just been waiting for a situation that required her to prove it. The 4 helicopters that had landed demanding Black Widow hadn't come to rescue a forgotten veteran. They'd come because they knew exactly what she was capable of, and they trusted her judgment over their own safety. That trust, earned through years of operations most would never know about, was the real validation. Not the salutes, not the apologies, not the reinstatement. The trust of operators who knew that when Black Widow called, you answered. Because she didn't call unless lives depended on it. And when lives depended on it, she was never wrong. That was the truth the Marines learned in the desert that day. It was a truth that couldn't be hidden by a prosthetic leg or a logistics assignment or 3 years of deliberate invisibility. Some people are simply too competent to remain unseen forever. Sarah Chen was one of those people, and now everyone knew it.